week's guest, in his 7th, I had to count them up, one-on-one appearance, is one of the most well-known jack-of-all-trades cryptocurrency experts. His Twitter feed at Ansel Lindner is must-read material, while his Bitcoin and Markets podcast, found at BTC Markets, except it's BTC MRKTS, is available on the World Crypto Network's iTunes channel. To that end, Ansel, welcome once again to One-on-One.
Thanks for having me, Andy. It's been a couple months.
Yes, and yet you've still been on 7 times. I've only been doing the show for, I started it almost a year ago at CGC, so I'll have a big year festival when that comes next month.
Cool.
Anyhow, for today's first topic, it's an easy one, particularly as Ansel is as savvy about financial markets in general as anyone in the crypto space. That said, while it's easy to simply ask, why did the Bitcoin market react so negatively to the tune of $1,000 in 24 hours to the SEC ETF delay announcement? The answer is far more complex than it may seem. The reasons being that, one, it's difficult to believe expectations for a yes were so high in the first place. Even if they were, nearly all of the SEC yes hype had already been erased at the time of the announcement. 3, Bitcoin did just fine when the Winklevoss ETF was denied in March 2017, rising from 1,000 to 20,000 in the ensuing 9 months. 4, the altcoins reaction to the SEC announcement was far worse, to the point it caused altcoin market capitalization to plunge to a new 10-month low. And 5, the SEC didn't actually deny the solid XVanEck Bitcoin ETF, but merely delayed the decision until September 30th, though admittedly, they could theoretically push it out to February if they so choose. And I will fix my camera in a second. Given all these cross currents, Ansel, tell us what you think was built into the Bitcoin price before the SEC announcement in terms of the odds of various scenarios, as well as why the Bitcoin and altcoin markets acted so violently in the aftermath.
Oh, complex question. This is very similar to what we've seen in the past in Bitcoin, right? Where we know that certain news might be coming or certain news is complete FUD, and people just use it to manipulate the price.
Oh. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Wait, hold on 1 second. It's like my camera goes on and then the sound goes off. Hold on 1 second. See, now my camera's off.
Okay, there's my camera. Can you speak and see if we hear you?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Technical difficulties. Test 1. I wonder if we should stop the stream and start over. Uh-oh, this is pretty bad technical difficulties here. Hi, audience.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
We're through it.
Awesome. Okay,
All
so
right. So the ETF. So tell me why you think the ETF, what was built into the price beforehand, and why did the markets act so crazy afterward?
Well, it's a very shallow market, right? So I think we've basically bottomed out. At least we've bottomed out in sentiment, and So we could see some wicks down in price, but for the most part, I think we are very sideways in a massive consolidation time. And so then there's big whales that can manipulate the price. And if they, within a range, they can manipulate the price. So they saw an opportunity to build up some ETF bullishness. And all of us, or a lot of the commentators in the space, have been saying it's probably going to get delayed, maybe even to push it back as far as February of 2019. So we all knew these delays were happening, and but it's a opportunity for these guys to manipulate the price. Now, the overall price movement, I think, is these altcoins will continue collapsing versus Bitcoin, and through different arbitrage, on roads and off or on ramps and off ramps, we'll see that affect the Bitcoin price. But I still stick with my call that we're in a massive consolidation period, and the bottom is, at least in sentiment, is in.
Yes, and we'll get to all these things in a second. You bring up some good points. For one, the thin market. Now, again, I think a lot of people like to believe that Bitcoin is this big liquid market. And yes, compared to altcoins, it's 1,000 times more liquid. But compared to the other markets, look, we're a $100 billion market cap or so. And let's face it, there's a very small float, 4 or 5. My estimate is there can't be more than 4 or 5 million that are floating, meaning available for sale. And of that amount, that includes like hours that are not available for sale. So I think that what you're seeing right now is back in the fall, there was huge amounts of liquidity, but now you have less liquidity, but you have more margin because all of these exchanges have rushed to do the Western, thing with adding margin. We just saw OKEX, the Hong Kong exchange, have somehow they allowed a trader to do a $400 million Bitcoin long trade without realizing he didn't have the collateral, and that caused problems. So I think you're right. I think the ultra thin markets are a big part of what's going on. So yes, these whales sometimes inadvertently can cause these kinds of moves.
Yeah, the OKEX thing was interesting. I think you can go up to 20x leverage, right? So a 5% move in the price can liquidate your position, and that's what happened there on that one. Yeah, it's a very, very thin market, and we're very, very early in the game, and that's one of the reasons why a lot of people are looking forward to the ETFs, and we were looking forward to futures and different products out there, because that adds liquidity to the marketplace. Adds, when Bitcoin is at a $10 trillion market cap, the liquidity is going to be a lot higher than it is today. And whales aren't going to be able to scare the price more than like 1%. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, I actually did an article yesterday called "How Early Are We?" because it just dawned on me that I think a lot of people thought, because of what happened just for a brief period, basically from November of last year to maybe February, where the whole world was in. I certainly saw it in my business. We saw it in the volumes on the exchanges. We saw the slowdowns in the networks, which were not helped by Bcash trying to slow down the network. But the fact is, we're back to a world where the price is much higher. There are much bigger players, but the liquidity has gotten much lower at the time where sentiment is very low. And I'll go back to the altcoins to ask you, look, here's my next question. Obviously the SEC, this was not to anyone watching news. I mean, it really literally wasn't news. They simply said we're delaying. If they had at least said no or yes, I could say, okay, that was a material news item, but this really wasn't at all. And what you have, though, is you have a lot of people who are still holding on after all the big losses this year, particularly in altcoins, which hit a 10-month low just 2 days ago. And I sense that, you talk about the whales selling off, and then I think you started to see some real capitulation, particularly in the altcoins. Do you see that that's, more of what's at play here than anyone really responding to this news?
Yes, I think a lot of people are, a lot of the speculators that got in the second half of 2017, and they caught all this ICO, the ICO pump. They're starting to realize, look, maybe we should evaluate our projects a little bit more, our investments a little bit more, and they're seeing that all of these things are worthless. So as the price of these, they'll start at the bottom tier, then it'll go to the mid tier, and it'll finally affect the top tier tokens. Not only in market cap, but just the realization in my mind that they're all test nets and they should be valued as test nets. And so I think that puts a somewhat of a negative sentiment about Bitcoin, but Bitcoin is dominated by holders. So like you say, and the price is going to be very resilient. That's why I think that the altcoin bubble popping, or the ICO bubble, you could call it that as well, that popping puts that negative pressure on Bitcoin's price, but it has been very resilient. I mean, when did February 5th is when we hit 6,000, right? And we're still up from there. Somebody was saying, some mainstream financial press person on Twitter was saying that, Bitcoin is down 60% this year. And then I was like, well, but we're up 10% since February. And so I don't know. It's just how you look at it. Bitcoin, in my mind, has been very resilient.
Yeah. We talk about negative price pressure that Bitcoin gets whenever the altcoins get it. And yes, I mean, there was a time back in December when alts were going down as Bitcoin was going up, but that was very unique because that was definitely a bull market phenomenon, what was going on. But the fact is, as Adam was talking about on his show this morning, like it turns out there was a Bcash bug. I think I remember a few months ago, one of the Bitcoin developers or ex-developers came out and said, hey, there was a Bitcoin bug, and if I had exposed it, it would have hurt the price. He was probably lying. But the fact is, if there's a bug in an altcoin, that also people, in the mainstream, especially times like this, say, hey, look, Bitcoin is bad. And apparently there was one in Bcash, which really has nothing to do with Bitcoin, but it brings Bitcoin down. And I agree 100% said all along about altcoins. While I think the sector is here to stay, it's not like altcoins are going to go away. Most people, almost all of them right now, have no purpose. Most of them came in, most were created at the top by pump and dumpers, by people trying to capitalize on the Bitcoin and Ethereum, success. And people are looking at it now. They're seeing the prices just go down and down and down, and they're going, why do I own B Gold? Why do I own EOS? I mean, they really don't do anything. Bitcoin's the only one right now that actually does anything, and so they're getting scared. And we're seeing, I think, classic capitulation. As for the Bitcoin, to me, and we'll get to this in a second, the capitulation happened. It happened in February, and it got to $100 billion market cap. And I was talking about it all fall. When we get to 100 billion, it's going to surge because institutions will come in. And I've been saying since then that this is going to be a major support because, look, the CBOE started futures. They wanted to have the ETF. You're talking about BlackRock, Goldman Sachs, the Intercontinental Exchange. They're all talking about coming in. This is what I think is going on. You're right. There's a consolidation right at this level where institutions came in. I mean, that's basically what you're saying. Is that right? Yes. And I do I think you point out often about the $100 billion market cap, and I think that is a very significant level. We could ride right above that for another 6 months before we break out. I think another timing is the effect of the last halvening and the effect of the next halvening. I mean, there's a lot of different fundamentals at play, but right now, I think the overriding reason why Bitcoin can't at least sustain, an upward price movement, even just slightly an upward trend, is because of the altcoins weighing it down. Yeah, and again, altcoins are not going away as much as people want to believe that, as if you are a quote maximalist. But the fact is, we are in a new world where people, as you say, are evaluating projects, and right now there's very little that's doing anything. We talk about my article the other day. You say how early it is. It really is extremely early. It's a lot later than it was even at this point. Well, a little past this point last year. We didn't even have a scaling debate completion. So the future of Bitcoin barely a year ago wasn't even certain. Even for me, I wasn't sure if the scaling debate would cause Bitcoin to break up. I had confidence, but not 100% confidence. So there was a little of praying going on, and it worked. So we're just a few months past that, and of course, that we had this bubble, and we had all of the promoters come in at the top and create tokens and promotions. Man, I remember all those podcasts just 6 or 7 months ago from all these young guys with their technical analysis and which tokens you should buy and which altcoins, and they're all gone right now. So right now, the only game in town is Bitcoin, and because the sector is so, sentiment is so bad, no one seems to care at all. And it's like we're talking about the ETF, which we'll get back to in a second. And I know people have been saying, well, why would the government approve the ETF? Bitcoin is a threat to them. And I'm thinking, right now, Bitcoin is a measly 100 billion market cap. The altcoin sector is decimated. No one is talking about Bitcoin at all. The dollar index is as strong as it's been in years. So I really don't think right now that Bitcoin is any more of a curiosity, just like it was, 18 months ago.
Yeah, and can you imagine back in like 2012 or 2013 and how much uncertainty you would have had back then hodling? I think like you're talking about
you had to hold it on Mount Gox back then. That was your only choice.
Yeah, like you're saying, just last year, 2017, you had this uncertainty. Now imagine going back to those very early days. So hodlers play a very big role in Bitcoin. They're very, very important. And there's no analysis of Bitcoin is complete without just blind faith in these hodlers. And, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yes. And once again, the math, people just, are ignoring the math. You could say that there's 21 million Bitcoin, but of course there's not. There's 17. There won't be 21 million for 100 years. There's 1 million in Satoshi's wallet. Now you're down to 16. And there's no doubt that at least 3 to 5 million have been lost. I mean, these numbers have been done. So now you're down, 7 million or so. And then, of course, you have people who hold it, hodlers. Hodlers are the vast majority of holders. I mean, the vast majority of trading right now is these margin accounts. There's no doubt about that because of these wide moves. But the vast majority of coin is in the hands of hodlers. There's very, very little that's out there to be traded, and very little. And we talk about capitulation. It's not Bitcoin hodlers. It's traders who came in at the higher prices, and it's margin people who are just trading in out of position. So I think
fiat traders.
Yeah, fiat traders just looking to make fiat profits. Whereas altcoins, I would venture to say, and tell me what you think, that no more than 5% of altcoin holders are the equivalent of hodlers. And I'll bet you of those, 90% of them are Ethereum holders.
Yes, and out of those 5% of the population of altcoiners that are hodlers, most of those are founders, right? And what will happen when those founders start saying, like, they know the internals of their altcoin, and they're like, well, crap, we're not ever going to be able to do what we think we're going to do. We're going to have to pivot. Well, maybe I'm going to de-risk myself a little bit and dump a little bit of my altcoin. So they're not even really hodlers because they have inside knowledge on the governance of their altcoin. Bitcoin has there's no one with inside knowledge on the governance of Bitcoin. You can't have insider trading really on Bitcoin to the degree that you do in the traditional system or in altcoins. So I think that's an important point. And yeah, you said earlier 4 to 5 million max available for sale at any one time, Bitcoins. And I think that's pretty high, honestly.
I'm saying 4.5 million that are in the hands of people like us who could sell it, as opposed to the ones that were lost or not mined or Satoshi's wallet. I'm not saying they are for sale. I'm saying they're theoretically available for sale. That's all.
Yeah. I think on exchange is available. Like in the order book, it's probably less than 2 million Bitcoins, and that would probably be pretty high. So yeah, there's not a lot of liquidity at all.
Right, and of course, these margin traders in an environment like this are the reason why you have so much more trading. Because I've marveled. I've always tried to believe that there wasn't that much margin trading. But it seems like slowly but surely, especially as the volumes have gone down at the exchanges, they are down massively from back in November, December. Obviously the exchanges are adding more and more margin capabilities just to generate revenues. The problem is that, one, it's dangerous. Look what happened to OKEX. They had to claw back their traders for the losses that they made because they couldn't manage it. And of course, the volatility gets out of control. And in a generally negative environment, that leads to more red wicks than green ones, because there's no way that all that even close to the amount of Bitcoin that's trading right now is actual Bitcoin. But the, like you said, the holders are the rock, and the institutions, now that more and more institutions are entering the game, and you hear them talking about it all the time, Goldman Sachs and BlackRock and the ICE now, clearly there's an incentive to maintain the $100 billion market cap, especially with the ETFs coming. We're going to get to the SolidX VanEck ETF in a second, but yeah, I think you have it right here that we have a big consolidation going on, and I'll add one more thing to what you said about. I said most of them are Ethereum holders because Ethereum's the only altcoin which has any real size. I mean, that anyone can really hodl onto. And like you said, a lot of those founders and ICOs who had proceeds in Ethereum who are slowly but surely getting rid of that too. So now that we're past that section, let's get back to this ETF, this crazy ETF. There are 9 ETFs that are going to be up for approval in the next 2 months. Some can be delayed, some can't. My guess is that a lot of them won't, even if some of them are approved, a lot of them are just leveraged proxies as opposed to actual physical. The only one that's an actual physical one, like the Winklevoss, which was denied, is the SolidX one, which is one share will be 25 Bitcoins. So it'll be $163,000 for a share right now, meaning they're trying to leverage to the cater to the big investors. So what do you think, Ansel? I mean, we see this insider today saying 99% chance of approval. We always believe this. Do you really think that this is going to get approved in maybe September or in February, or is this just a lot of more hype that has nothing behind it?
Well, I'm very bullish that it will be approved, but I was also very bullish that the Winklevoss one would be approved last year. So I don't know. Maybe I'm not the best one to ask about the probability that it'll be approved. I think it's a no-brainer for these large financial institutions. I don't see any downside other than letting Bitcoin grow, right? So maybe they don't want to let Bitcoin grow, so they're going to deny it. But short of that, I don't see any downside to any of these institutions. Obviously, there's tons of demand out there from their investors and their clients, etc. So, yeah, I think it'll probably be approved, but they'll want to be very cautious and push it back as far as possible. So we're probably going to be waiting until 2019. And a lot of these things, like you said, the guy, some insider that came out and said a 99% chance of approval. Who knows if they're priming the market? They're trying to manipulate the market, so that they can get us up to the top of the range, up at 8,000, and then have some bad news at the end of September that crashes us back down to 6,000. So I think a lot of these insider things and leaks and yada, 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 that's all noise. You just got to wait until the day, make your rational evaluation of people's incentives and invest appropriaply.
Yeah, I think it's funny that you said that you believe the Winklevoss ETF would be approved last year. This year doesn't count because I don't think anyone even knew that this secondary appeal was even going to be announced. And I'm trying not to read anything into it as to the timing. I think maybe they just wanted to get it out of the way so they can focus their efforts on the one that they know that has the most likelihood of going through. Because a year ago, I didn't think there was a chance. I actually thought at the time the government had a little fear of Bitcoin, as small as it was, whereas now I get the sense that they just don't seem to care about it anymore, especially after the crash. But yeah, I agree 100% because when you talk about unnamed sources, who knows what that unnamed source is, or if there even is an unnamed source, and they're just, like you said, manipulating the market. My belief about ETFs is that probably if they tried to get it done last year at the end of the year, it would not, because the government would have showed fear of it. But now I don't think that they care. I do believe it's going to go through, because if they don't do it, someone else will. There's a lot of other countries in the world where 90% of the population lives, and many of those are Bitcoin friendly. So it's not like the US SEC can just say, we will stop Bitcoin if we deny the ETF, especially when all of their biggest institutions, like the CBOE, for instance, and the ICE are pushing to get it done. So I think it will get done. I don't know if it'll get done in September or February, but I think it's insane to believe that it won't get done. It's just a financial product. The government itself has already said that it's not a security, it's just a commodity. So it'll get done. It's just a matter of time. And frankly, there's pros and cons of it, but for the most part, I think it's a pro. And I'd rather see it sooner rather than later. And again, we go back to the things that they're considering right now as the first crypto ETF. What do you think the biggest issues, just practically speaking, do you think that the SEC would be worried about in letting it get done?
What you broke up a little bit of the last sentence.
What is the SEC most concerned about? What do they have to resolve in your mind first and foremost before they would let it go?
Well, in their words from the Winklevoss, right, it was the kind of size of the total global market, that it wasn't really, it was too shallow, and there was no insurance, right? That was kind of their dual reasoning for denying the Winklevoss. So I think that's still probably at the forefront of their mind for most people. But of course, I always think that there are some people in powerful positions in these agencies that, they have other interests. Maybe they are from a powerful banking family that will be destroyed if they approve a Bitcoin ETF or let Bitcoin grow. So I don't know. I think there's overall, though, I would say as a policy type thing, it would be insurance maybe at this point, because the market has matured a lot. So maybe like custody and insurance and security, those type of issues would be forefront on their mind. I did want to make a point about what you said there just before, that it's interesting to me that we don't hear a lot, like, in 2014, 15, we heard from a lot of the Bitcoin skeptics that, the US government could just ban Bitcoin tomorrow. Right. And we don't hear that anymore. At least I haven't heard it from anybody significant in a while. And that's, to me, that's kind of an interesting narrative shift. And we also, that plays into the ETF thing, like Stockholm, right? The Stockholm NASDAQ has an ETF. It's not fully backed by Bitcoin, but it is a Bitcoin ETF. And there's other products coming to Japan. There's all sorts of things. And so this regulatory arbitrage environment and the fact that nobody's saying anymore that, the US can just ban Bitcoin and kill it overnight. Like we don't, there is this fundamental underswell shift in narrative. Bitcoin is becoming more accepted in everybody's mind. Nobody says it's monopoly money anymore, right? It's a real thing. And so, yeah, culminating in January, February, I do think the ETF will be approved.
Good points. And actually, with the Winklevoss thing, the way I understood it, because there's obviously a lot of reasons, they mentioned manipulation. They didn't like the fact that the Winklevi had so much power in pricing it, being that they're outsiders, and they were going to be very narrow in how they do it. And we've seen these exchanges have huge differences. Look at the Korean ones. At one point, there was several $1,000 difference in the prices of Bitcoin. So they're worried about that. And of course, they have to be worried, whether sincere or not, about the size and volatility of the market. People just had massive losses in the crypto market. Like you said, even at 100 billion market cap, it's a relatively thin security. And so in their mind, that the last thing they want to do is approve it, and then the next minute it gets crushed and they look stupid. So, but aside from that, like you said, there's just too much pressure around the world. Demand is there supporting the price. Other countries are there supporting the price. There's no doubt that Japan is at some point going to have a Bitcoin ETF. I mean, that government is supportive. And like you said, the whole thing with ban Bitcoin, as I call this the bear market with no bad news, at least for Bitcoin, not altcoins. I mean, the things that all the things we talked about last year, the things that were there when the price went up from 1,000 to 20,000 are all gone. I mean, remember when the Chinese, they didn't just say we're going to ban it. They did. They said we're closing our exchanges. We're closing the capital controls. You can't take it out of the country. You can't even withdraw it from the exchanges. They did all that. Price didn't care. Price is a lot higher now than it was when they said that. No one's talking about it anymore. The U.S., again, there's all this talk about will they approve the ETF? Not once have I heard anyone say they won't approve it because they're thinking about banning it or they're scared that it's going to. No, they themselves said it's a commodity, and I think everyone realizes that you can't ban it. Heck, they just said Ethereum is not even a security, and it was sold as a security. So I think they're already saying we can't even stop Ethereum, which is centralized, and Bitcoin, forget it. It's totally decentralized. So I agree 100% on everything you said there. It will get done. The only question is when. And actually, I was going to go on to another topic here. But you know what? Since obviously people know what I think of technical analysis, I think it's part of an arsenal of tools from fundamental analysis all the way down. I think it's useful to look at, but it's not the end all. But I will ask you, as someone who actually has one of the better backgrounds in fundamental and technical analysis, just curious. You talk about a consolidation. What does Bitcoin look like right now? What does the altcoin sector look like right now?
Oh man, well, I'm not the best technical analyst or fundamental analyst, really. I mean,
you're a good fundamental analyst, that's for sure, and you know markets. So I'm just curious. You could pass on the question if you'd like.
Yeah, well, I think I don't really know where to go with that, so I'll pass.
Gotcha. And my answer to it is, again, I've always said that in the short term, anything could happen. I think it's all mumbo jumbo and could be spun either way, and often is as a double-edged sword. You always say it can do this, and if it doesn't, it'll do that. But the fact is, I see a big consolidation. I see a massive amount of support, and I see a massive amount of resistance, and I see fundamentals that have never been stronger. I mean, literally never been stronger. The hash rate, the fees, the speed, the altcoins dying right in front of them. Remember Bcash? Wasn't Bcash going to be the next Bitcoin? Bcash is going to be lucky. I've said this a million times. It's now down to 9.5% of a Bitcoin. All the other forks are at like 0.5%, right? Why is Bcash at 9.5% of a Bitcoin? They literally have done nothing. And if this plug was exposed, it could have been cut in half in a day. Tell me, what competition is out there at all? Is there ever going to be competition?
Competition for Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, I think it permanently died in the last few months.
Yes, I agree. Bitcoin is a communications protocol for value, and so it will continue to consolidate. Now with Lightning Network, we have a avenue for it. Instead of doing an ICO on Ethereum, you can do something cool with the Lightning Network, right? You can make an app on the Lightning Network. It will be centralized, but that's okay. All the dApps, quote unquote dApps on Ethereum are centralized anyway. They just lie to you and say that they are decentralized. So yeah, there's looking back at the history of the internet and how that progressed. It took, about 10 years to have a clear leader in TCP/IP. And then it took about another 10 years for everything to consolidate on top of TCP/IP. So I think it'll be much faster with Bitcoin. Maybe it is going to be the 8 years that we've had, or altcoins have only been around for 6 years. So 6 years for the altcoins, and then another 6 years to everything consolidates on top of Bitcoin. But I think that's the general direction we're going. There is no room for a second language on the internet, right? Like you're not going to, this is a monetary thing, and there is only one universal medium of exchange that's going to be accepted. And on the internet, it's going to be the same thing. You're not going to be able to have Ethereum that has a major value compared to Bitcoin that has major value. That they're going to both consolidate onto one thing, and I think that's going to be Bitcoin.
Right. And, there obviously have been altcoins around from 2011 or so. I mean, Litecoin was there and a handful of others. But if you ask me, when did the altcoin market get born as we know it? I'd say last year. I'd say basically at the time of SegWit, that's when you had a huge amount of these new altcoins come flying on. A lot of the top 10s came out in the middle of last year. The Cardanos and the EOSs and Tron and all these things, they just came out of nowhere. So most altcoins are less than a year old. I mean, the majority of the market cap of altcoins, with the exception of Litecoin, is brand new. And they've already proven that, we're not having an altcoin flipping or an Ethereum flipping or a Bcash flipping. No, Bitcoin is its own thing. If you want to be a successful altcoin, you're going to have to find a niche, and there will be niches, plenty of them that could be very profitable over time. But right now, when you look at what's out there, there's absolutely nothing that's even close to creating that kind of value. And we'll see what happens with Ethereum. We just will have to see, because I'm not sold. Go.
Yeah, so I think the Lindy effect has a lot to do with this. So the older altcoins, I think, are going to survive longer, actually. So these ICOs have, they pumped and they dumped, and they'll probably die within a year or two from now. But these other altcoins that have been like Litecoin, that have been around, or Dogecoin that's been around for 4 or 5 years now, they will last longer into the cycle. And that's an interesting aspect. I had a question for you, if I may.
Yeah.
Okay, so in 2013, at the end of that, with the Mt. Gox bubble, we had this huge existential crisis, right? 75% of all of the trading and 800,000 Bitcoins got hacked. This was a huge deal for Bitcoin, and a lot of people thought it was dead. And we had a 2-year extended bear market at that time, or recession, or whatever you want to call it. Now, we didn't have anything like that this time. Like you say, it's a bear market with no bad news. Well, comparing it to the 2014-15 bear market, how would you say the fundamental differences in these two markets? What do you predict? Is this going to be a much shorter pullback? Are we going to consolidate for another whole year, 6 months? Or how much longer do you think this can go when comparing it to the 2014 era?
Well, the first thing I'll say is we're already 8 months into it, because we peaked in December of 2017, and we're getting closer to the end of the summer. So it's a long time already in Bitcoin years. But, I remember, because I did have one Bitcoin back at Mt. Gox. My God, the customer service there before the disaster was unlike like the worst cable company, like Comcast. Nothing I've ever seen was like that. And that was before the issues. I mean, things were bad. And when that happened, fortunately, I didn't have much in there, but I was just like, oh my God, I'm done with this thing. I'm just going to sit and watch it and watch it and watch it. It took me 2 years before I sensed the stability that enabled me to get confident to put my toes back in the water. Now, this time around, obviously, I started out all in, but the fact is, as you said, nothing bad happened. In fact, something too good happened. We had too much excitement and too much capital flow into it too quickly. And of course, it invited the hangers on, and you had the whole .com effect, where a lot of pump and dump went on, and the next thing you know, the sentiment sours. But when you look at what's going on, all the things that people worried about Bitcoin have vanished. I mean, we were more worried about what was going to happen with Bitcoin when the price was much lower, when people were worrying about the scaling debate, than we were after the crash. So again, that's why I feel as comfortable as I've ever been before. I also see, I look at precious metals, they are dead. I mean, demand is completely dead at a time where it should be as high as it's ever been. Inflation is high, geopolitical tensions are high. Every day we're seeing new currencies crash across the globe, and central banks are still doing crazy things, negative interest rates and printing money. So right now, I can't see why anyone would believe that there'd be this big crash in Bitcoin, which is the future, when it's held up this well for so long. And the more things get bad, the more its competition is getting hurt, from the altcoins to precious metals. So I just can't see, after 8 months, how we have this long, prolonged situation ahead of us, especially because the global situation in money just looks so bad. So, but what do I know? I mean, you never know. But if you ask me, what do I think? I think 8 months is a long time. And I think that at some point, some event is going to make things happen, which brings me to the next topic, which is a news item that hit last night that, frankly, is much more Bitcoin bullish than even last week's news that the ICE plans to build a crypto platform for mainstream institutional investors, which is that Overstock.com, which frankly is the poster child for mainstream early adoption, announced on its earnings call last night that a $375 million investment was made by a Hong Kong private equity firm, valuing its fledgling blockchain operations at $1.5 billion. This is Overstock just started a blockchain subsidiary. It couldn't have been more than a year or two ago. And this company is valuing it at $1.5 billion, which is like 1.5% of all of Bitcoin. So in the way that I look at this, it's trying to say that $20,000 Bitcoin is a lot more, on a par with this investment than $6,000 Bitcoin. What do you think of this Overstock announcement? Do you think I'm overblowing it? Do you think it is truly saying that the market is just not focusing right now on the amount of upside potential Bitcoin has?
Yeah, I think you may be overstating it a little bit there. I think it's a general representation of how a lot of these big companies, what is it, GSR Capital, that invested in Overstock? Is that what?
I forgot what it's called. It's just a bunch of letters. Yeah, that I didn't know they were. A private equity firm.
Yeah. And so it shows that there's a lot of demand from these private equity firms, hedge funds, et cetera, that are looking to get into Bitcoin. So I think that is representing that, or into crypto, right? Because this was an Ethereum ICO. And who knows how good their actual team is, their programming developer team. It makes me question their competency that they launched this on Ethereum, right? And then you look at a lot of their lead people. I'd have to bring it back up, but they're all from altcoin ICO land. There's no, like, Peter Todd is not an advisor to this T0. Gregory Maxwell, Adam Back, none of those guys. It's all Ethereum altcoin pumpers. And so I think it is a good representation of, like I say, the demand to get into Bitcoin, but I'm not bullish on T0 at all. Security tokens, I'm not bullish on them. The problem with securities is the regulation. It's not the technology. If there was no regulation, they could make a new trading system basically overnight for the traditional stocks, and they wouldn't need any sort of tokenization. The problem is the regulation, and the centralized blockchain company can't get around regulation as far as I'm concerned. So, yeah, probably a lot less bullish than you are on that.
Oh, no, I think you're misunderstanding me. I'm not talking about my bullishness about T0. I couldn't care less about that. I'm talking about the fact that a independent investing group is willing to value something in crypto at $1.5 billion and not just say it, but actually put the money in. That's what I'm focused on, because, there's tons of people out there who say stuff like, the ICE, the Intercontinental Exchange. It's great. They're going to create this digital platform, and Starbucks is going to help them, and Microsoft, and they want to get institutional investment. That's a great announcement. Just as it is that BlackRock is putting together a team of analysts and consultants to figure out how they want to enter the space. That's a great announcement too. Same with Goldman saying, we want to create a cryptocurrency custodian arrangement. Great news, except they didn't actually do anything. But when someone puts that kind of money in, big dollars, and at a big valuation, to me, it's saying that they see the upside potential. Because let's face it, you're talking about this T0. It's kind of like a joke of an entity, and yet it's valued at 1.5% of the entire Bitcoin market. So someone out there is putting their money where their mouth is, and I find that pretty bullish. Finally, go.
Yeah, so I think you can see some of that in a lot of different places, like Poloniex, right? They were just acquired for $400 million. It's not 1.5 billion, but it's in that. Why wouldn't Poloniex be way more valuable than T0? I don't understand it, but yeah, and we see a lot of these type of investments with EOS, where they have a lot of corporate insiders that were able to invest early, that get all of the RAM on their network, whatever that means. I don't know, but they have a lot of perks if they were crypto hedge funds that invested, or these Silicon Valley VCs that invested in EOS, they get perks. So yeah, there's does show a shift maybe away from retail speculators. Like maybe even the altcoin pumpers know that the retail speculators aren't where it's at anymore, and that they need to go after the hedge fund speculators, the pension fund speculators, and get them in on the next round of rally here.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned the hedge fund speculators. Again, I worked for hedge funds. I worked for Wall Street buy side and sell side a long time. And that's why I was able to say definitively, once we get to 100 billion, there's going to be a huge amount of increase in institutional investment. I also said, just because the timing was perfect, it happened in November, I said, just wait till January 1st. Hedge funds start on the quarter. They are very highly regulated, illiquid securities. They really can only start at quarters, and the vast majority start January 1st. Probably, I would bet 3/4 of all hedge funds start January 1st, and they can't, most of them don't let you take your money out for a year, sometimes 6 months. But I said, look, they're going to all start January 1st, and they did. And these hedge funds are what created the bubble that got us to where we are today. Without a doubt, it wasn't Bitcoin. Bitcoin went up before January 1st. It was the altcoins with them all rushing in on January 1st. And they're like, well, we got to diversify. Can't just own Bitcoin. Let's just buy everything else. And they did. And they created a big bubble. But these were small hedge funds. These were not the kind of hedge funds. We talk about hedge funds. We're not talking about Bridgewaters, guys who have $10 billion to invest. We're talking about guys who are investing 20 million, 50 million, 30 million. The next round is going to be the big investors. And that's why you have these big ETFs that are being planned, like the SolidX VanEck, which are not just for, little small fry running other people's money. We're talking about institutions who want to own multiples of 25 Bitcoin for hodling. That's what I see as coming next. It's just a matter of time when it's approved.
Well, they'll want to own infrastructure too, correct? So they'll want to buy up those exchanges, and they'll want to buy up all that other stuff. I think a very damaging reality that happened in crypto land, Bitcoin space, is Ethereum pumped. And what happened with all that new value that was created? Well, they invested it into ICOs. And then some people that might have gotten in the pre-sale for Ethereum, now they're multimillionaires. They start their own hedge fund, quote unquote, crypto hedge fund, like this multi-coin capital BS that's out there. In different interviews, you hear they slip and say, yeah, we use our relationships to invest, right? So they invest early in these ICOs and then they pumped them. So I think the whole root of this evil that was the great pump and dump, ICO pump and dump, was the fact that Ethereum pumped in the first place.
Right, so. Because I'm sure Vitalik himself didn't realize what he had created. He didn't realize it was a machine for mass producing pump and dump schemes. I'm sure that was not the goal, but that's what it turned out to be. And that's why Ethereum at still $30-something billion is such an interesting test case for what the world will turn into, especially because ultimately whatever they do, Bitcoin can do. They do have big market share and mind share, but we'll see what happens when there's the next big pump. Will Ethereum still be the winner, or will it lose market share this time around? We'll see. And you talk about how the big money wants to invest in service companies, and again, exactly, that's what, like Wall Street wants to invest in. They want to get the fees, they want to get the M&A fees, they want to get the commissions for all the trading. They don't necessarily make their money with proprietary trading, and so yes, they're going to want to buy service companies. That's why I was asking. I had Trace Mayer on last week. I said, how are people going to do this? Because like how are people going to buy Kraken? You can't just buy Kraken stock. And so that's going to be the big mystery. Will it be through future ICOs, IPOs? I doubt it'll be that, or something in between. But there's going to be a whole new way of investing that's not going to just be, well, let's just buy every altcoin out there and try to get all boats to float. Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So finally, so we're running out of time. Let's talk about the rest of 2018. We have less than 5 months left. With the 1-year anniversary, as I said, of 20,000 Bitcoin 4 months away. Given all that you see in the crypto markets and upcoming events like the 2019 Litecoin halving, which is a year from now in August, what's your best guess? You asked me, what's your best guess for how long the Bitcoin market will stay depressed?
Oh man,
you asked me, I could ask you.
Yeah. I think that I mean, if you would have asked me in December, I would have said, 3 months. But now, I mean, I think it's going to be shorter. It's going to be shorter than we all think. And in the time, we're going to miss it. Like, investors will always, if you're a trader, you're always going to miss buying the bottom, right? Or buying exactly at the turnaround point. And so I think a lot of people are going to miss it. It's probably going to happen at maximum bearish sentiment that it turns around and we pop out of there. But I do think it has a lot to do with the halvening. And I don't want to admit that. Like, I know that has a lot to do with supply and stuff. But I've really avoided putting anything on the halvening. I think it has to do with sort of adoption and the geopolitical scene, right? That people will discover and adopt Bitcoin. So I don't want to say it's purely a halvening issue, but man, the last halvening, we started up about a year out from the last halvening, and we'll probably do the same this time. So that is roughly 4 months into 2019, maybe a little bit earlier than that. Maybe at the end of this year, we'll start breaking out and approaching all-time highs again. But that's what I'm kind of looking at. And a lot of the fundamentals are still really strong, like mining and altcoin dominance. They're dying off. So I think that's bullish for Bitcoin. And so a lot of the fundamentals are still really strong. Like you say, there's no real bad news out there. We're just waiting for the turnaround.
Yeah, and it's funny, the whole thing with technical analysis, you got everyone out there who says, that like all the people who are negative now. And of course, they're negative. This is what you do in technical analysis. The prices go down, you become negative. But you say, of course, they can go up. And if prices go up, you become positive. And you say, yeah, but they can go down. And you play both sides. And it's funny because now anyone who's been negative on TA, saying, I'm a bear, they get credited as being right, even though, as you said, the price is up from where they first got negative. These people were positive all the way up. Then it started crashing, and you do the typical, yeah, but buying the dip. Then finally you capitulate and say it's going down, and then of course it went right back up. And then people like me who say the fundamentals are all that matter. That I'm bullish. They say, yeah, but the price is not going up. You're wrong, and he's right. But the fact is, no one's been right. We have been in this consolidation for a long, long time. $100 billion market cap is right now about $5,800. And we have not been able to go through that. And on the upside, again, there's declining trend lines and all this stuff. And people could believe whatever they want about that. But declining trend lines get broken. And they often get broken at times of maximum bearish sentiment, let alone when you have all kinds of good news. Right now, no one's been right about the price. But then again, no one was right about it last year either. There was not a soul in Bitcoin during the scaling debate that thought it would go to $20,000. And when it got to $20,000, and everyone was saying it's going to take over the world, there was not a soul who was going to say, you know what, it's about to go down and crash 70%. It's the nature of markets. We are in Bitcoin because we hodl, because we know the fundamentals are good. How much differently would you put that argument?
Yeah, nobody knows exactly where the price is going. I know where the price is going long term. It's going up. So, and if you take out 2 or 3 weeks of December, like the last week of November and the first 2 weeks of December of last year, we're right. We've been at this price level since November 1st. So it's even longer of a consolidation in my mind. So I think
it's and it's funny you should say that. I'm just going to cut you off for 1 second because again, we were in the 5,000s.
Yeah.
Or SegWit, we were in maybe the 3,000. Then we had this big breakout right after SegWit went through, and SegWit 2X was canceled, and we went to just about 8,000. And then there was a crash with Bcash coming in with one of their big attacks. And the next thing you know, it's the 6,000 level. We sit there for a while, pump to 20, and now we're, like you said, 6,000. We're just above 100 billion. That's where we've been for a very long time.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything that's going to take us much lower. Like I say, we can always wick down, but I don't see any sort of sustained prices below 6,000.
Yeah, and again, that's all the prediction we could do on this show. We know no more. Trust me, we know no more than Andreas or the smartest fundamental people in Bitcoin, and we know no more or less than the top TA gurus. No one knows what the price is going to do in the short term, and no charts know what it's going to do. We just know that the fundamentals are strong. We know that the support is there from institutions, and we don't see why anyone would believe that all these years of gains would just go away simply because all people looking at a chart say so. I think we're in a consolidation for a while. This altcoin weakening is certainly not helping any, but then again, it's certainly helping Bitcoin dominance. And I think we had big gains. A year ago, we were barely getting past the scaling debate at half the price. A year and a half ago, we were in triple digits. So we watch and wait and see what happens. And it's time for Ansel to go. So we're going to conclude today's podcast. Thank you again. Ansel is awesome. I love having him on the show. Follow him at Ansel Lindner and at his podcast at BTC MRKTS, at BTC MRKTS. And as for me, check out my daily blog at cryptogoldcentral.com and my Twitter feed, and also email me at ahoffman@cryptogoldcentral.com if you have any consultation questions. Thank you, everybody. Have a great crypto day, and thank you, Ansel.